Today's guest is Joanne Chitwood, and you can find her at joannechitwood.com. And Joanne does have a book out that's called Please Help Me Die Well. And this is really a book that guides nurses, but also it can guide, again, family members through this journey of the world of the person who's dying. So, Joanne, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Chuck. I'm so glad to be here.
This is something that we have all been through, or at least we will be going through, every single one of us, young and old. And I wanted to start off by asking you four particular questions, if you could answer those. So if that's okay, I'd like to start with number one. Is that okay with you?
Yes, that's good.
Okay. The first thing that comes to mind is, what is something that most nurses or even family members consistently get wrong when they encounter somebody's actively dying?
I think misunderstanding what's happening is a very common thing. There are certain signs that things are progressing, and I can talk about that in more detail in a little while. But often, just before someone is ready to take that final little slide toward the end, there'll be what we call a surge day. And I believe that it's meant to be that way because this is a day when the person perks up, they're talking lucidly, they have energy, they may do something that they haven't been able to do before. They have conversations with their family, and the family and even caregivers can get caught in this as they think, "Oh, things are improving. The person's going to get better. This is their chance to move in a different direction." And so I talk to my families a lot and my patients and other staff and say, take advantage of this day, say what you want to say, have this wonderful time with this person, but realize that tomorrow they'll probably go lower than they were before today. And this may be very close to the end because this really consistently happens just before the end.
That's really good to know because I think when something like that happens or they're going through, you have a false hope and you think,
Yes.
"Oh my gosh, there's another day." And then you delay because you're happy. And then I think you go slide back into the position of not care for dying, but care to get better, if that makes any
Yes.
sense.
Yes. Go into a place of denial. And what I really hope for my families and my patients is that they'll take advantage of this time because there's two times in life that are really spiritually open and really important in a person's life. One is birth, when you've been at a birth, how open everybody is, how much hope there is, all the things that are happening. People don't realize that everything is just really spiritually wide open at that time. The second time is during the dying process. Things are wide open, and it's a time when there's a lot of potential for healing, for saying things maybe that the person hasn't had a chance to say before, for the family to come together, and really lasting change can happen during this time.
Yeah. Well, the other thing that I really wanted to ask you about this is that you kind of described that the end of life care is kind of like a sacred journey. So I was wondering, what does that really look like in real practical terms when you're at the bedside?
Okay. Well, there are 3 stages to the dying process, and a lot of people don't understand this. A lot of even workers that work with people who are dying don't understand this. And there's a stage called decline, and that's when someone starts refusing food. They start losing weight. They say, "Oh, it's just going to here. I'm not hungry. I really don't want to eat that." And the family, this is really upsetting when you're a family member. And I've been a family member several times with a loved one during this time. And I know psychologically, when we love somebody, we feed them. And if somebody's not eating, it's like, oh no, if you don't eat, things are going to get worse. But what happens during this time is the body is shifting where it's taking its nutrition from the inside instead of the outside. And it's a preparation that's actually happening in the body to make that process better and easier and less painful. And so the person will stop eating and they'll cut down on what they're drinking. They'll have less output in every way. And you'll just see they will go from being, they may be out gardening and doing all these things, and then they'll get more tired and they'll want to be in the chair more. They start sleeping more. And then they move into a stage called transition. And in transition, that's when the appetite really goes down, their weight loss increases, They are in transition. They may get to the point where they're not eating at all, and they want to drink very little, and they may get to the point during transition where they're completely in bed. They need help. They may go from being independent with doing all their physical things like bathing and transferring and, fixing food and eating and all those things to being dependent. And toward the end of the transition stage, they may be completely bedfast. And then the last stage is the active dying stage. And in that stage, they aren't eating at all. Some people go into a coma or semi-comatose state. I always say in this stage, they can hear you. So continue to say whatever you want to say. I know I compare it to the transition phase of labor for any women listeners, where if people are chatting about other things outside that don't have anything to do with what's going on, I wanted to just shout, "Be quiet. Can't you see what I'm doing here?" So I would recommend just keeping it focused on that person and toward that person, but you can say the things that you want to say. And even though they can't acknowledge that or answer you, they're still hearing you. I compare it often to, if you've had the experience of falling asleep for a nap on the couch and your family comes in and you're just awake enough to be able to hear everything they're saying and they're talking about you, ha ha ha, there she is asleep, in the middle of the day. And you want to say, hey, I can hear every word you're saying, but you're too much in that twilight place to be able to actually say anything. And that's what I compare this stage to, is they can hear you and they can understand what you're saying. They just may not be able to physically respond and let you know. They may not be able to open their eyes or squeeze your hand, but they do hear what you're saying. So it's a time to tell them how much you love them. And there was one experience that I had with a young Native Alaskan man when I was in Alaska, nursing up there, doing hospice nursing. And all these people from his tribe were in the house. I came in and I thought, wow, this is a lot of family. And I asked, who are these people? They said, well, we surround our people with love. And they were singing and they were talking to him. He was in the bed, and then they pulled me in the middle of the circle and said a blessing over me. And it was a really amazing experience. And I thought, oh, I wish everybody could have this experience of being so surrounded with love at a time when they can't respond, but they know those people are in the room. They know who's there. And it's an amazing
That
time.
that's good to know and actually comforting to know for the future. And what I mean by that is we are all going to go through this process of the end and this transition, as you put it. So it is comforting to know now that I will hear what
Yes.
people are saying. And
Yes.
hopefully those who are watching and listening now understand and know that. And like
Yeah.
you said, continue to talk to them, even though they don't respond or they can't. And again, that just comforts me knowing that. I think of it as a cocoon. You're going into a cocoon for that
Yeah.
change.
That's perfect. That is a perfect analogy. Yes. And there are other things that we see during that time, and some of them can be really upsetting to families if they don't understand what's happening. And one of them is breathing changes and circulation changes as someone moves toward the actual final breath. So there are several different breathing patterns. They may start breathing more rapidly, and some of that depends on what the diagnosis is. Someone with a lung issue will have breathing issues anyway, but pretty much everybody will get to a point where they'll breathe faster. It just seems like their breathing picks up, and then they'll come to a stage where they may hold their breath. It's called apnea, and so there'll be this long period of apnea. And then they go and they'll start breathing faster and faster, and then it'll get slower and slower, and then they'll have another long stretch. And that's called Shane-Stokes respirations. It's a term that we use a lot in hospice. And that's a pretty late sign. And then after that, they go into a real shallow breathing pattern that is just not effective at all. And you can see changes in their whole body when they go into that breathing pattern.
I'm shaking my head. Yes. Everything that you are telling us right now is everything that I've gone through with my father. And
Yes.
now it's bringing everything back. And I see exactly the stages as you are presenting it to us. I'm able to follow along and I see all of that, the breathing, everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, going along with that, what are some of the subtle signs, emotional or physical, that indicates a person is really nearing that that we can miss? I'm asking that because you know we missed certain signs, and I had mentioned right before we really started this that I was really looking forward to this because I know that I missed some of the signs. Other than like this breathing, we're talking about a couple different stages. Are there other emotional or physical signs that a
Yes.
person is near death?
Yes. As someone gets toward the end of transition and is moving toward active, they will tend to withdraw from their surroundings. Um, they'll choose who they want to be in the room.
Mm.
Not if it's someone that's going to distract from their process, they may not want that person there. And it's not anything about how much they love or don't love that person. It's about sometimes if there's someone that doesn't want them to go, they may wait until that person is out of the room to be able to move forward in their process because that person's energy is holding them back. They often start seeing things that nobody else can see, and we call it hallucinations, but, I just don't know. I would hesitate to say that it's something that's not there. They may see relatives that have gone on before. I've seen my patients, when it gets toward the very end, they'll look up in the corner of the room, and with this look like, they're seeing something really beautiful, and they may not be able to talk at that point, but who are we to say what they're seeing in that room and what they aren't? Because this is such a wide, wide open spiritual time that I think anything is possible. And we see that a lot.
Definitely. Joanne, I want to ask you now, you have some incredible information. How and where did you get all this? I think you have decades of work, right?
Yes.
I don't want to throw out the exact number of years since I
Well,
say
I will.
decades.
It's 40. I've
Wow.
been I've been doing this for 40 years. It has been I dabbled in pediatrics, and when I went into nursing, I was trying to find my niche. In fact, I didn't even know to look for a niche. And one day I was taking care of an elderly woman, and I was working the evening shift in a nursing home. And I was taking care of this elderly woman, and her son just pulled me aside and said, "Joanne, you are a hospice nurse." And this was back even before the Medicare hospice benefit was even in existence. Hospice had just come to the United States maybe a decade before, and it was not very well known, and I had certainly never heard of it. And he said, "I'm a hospice volunteer, and I'm telling you, hospice nurses are born, and you are one." And so the next time I went somewhere that I was looking for a job, I went, it was a home health agency, and I went in there thinking, "Oh, I can do home health." And when I walked in, the supervisor said, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't have any home health positions, but I need a hospice nurse." And I said, "Oh, good, because I'm a hospice nurse. You'll just have to teach me how to be one." And that started it. There was a wonderful, wonderful LPN that was keeping the hospice going until they found an RN to come in and be in charge. And she taught me, she was amazing, and she taught me so much. And once I got into hospice, I never wanted to do anything else because there is no other area of caring. I would say nursing, but I'd say caring in general, where there is so much meaning and purpose, and there's so much to be able to do to make this better. I call it the window test. I'll go into a home. I've done a lot of hospice admissions. And so I'll go into the home and things are chaotic. The patient's in pain, anxious, the family is just shaking with fear. They're talking about everything at once because they just don't know what to do. This is terrifying. And they may have just gotten the terminal diagnosis and the doctor says, "Oh yeah, she's got 3 weeks," and they just don't know what to do. And so what I do is I lower my voice I lower it down and I slow it down, and I'll find who the main person is in the caregiving role, and I'll take them over to the table and I'll say, "Let's sit down and talk." And I say, "Tell me your biggest fear. Tell me what's happening. Tell me what you know." And then I just sit there and listen while they share whatever it is. And I can just feel the tension level coming down because there aren't very many places in the medical community that somebody really gets listened to. And they need that, they need to be able to say what their fears are. Until you bring the fear and anxiety level down, nothing else is gonna happen. If a nurse goes in there and says, "Okay, we have to go through the medicines, we need to do this, we need to do that," they're not gonna get anywhere. And so
Yeah.
that's what I teach in my materials and in classes that I've taught is your number one job, your first priority is sit down and listen to the family, listen to the caregiver. And then I'll go over and I'll sit down at eye level with the patient. And if they're able to communicate with me, even if they aren't, I'll go and put my hand under their hand. I don't put my hand on top of anything because someone that has had an abuse background, that feels threatening, especially a stranger comes in, it feels oppressive. And so I'll lift their hand from underneath and I'll just talk to them quietly and ask them if they're able to talk. I'll ask them, what's your pain level? How, on a scale of 0 to 10, if 0 is no pain and 10 is excruciating, can you tell me how much you're hurting right now? Tell me about your anxiety, and I'll talk to them. So before I do anything else, that communication and listening to the family and the patient are crucial. And there is nowhere else in medicine that's possible, that happens.
So this is kind of like trying to meet the what do we call the unique needs of each individual person
Mhm.
is what we're trying to establish and trying to do.
Yeah. And I'm really interested personally in childhood trauma and how it affects people in their lives forevermore after that, unless they get some therapy with EMDR, internal family systems, find a therapist that can help them with that. And so I'll talk about those things with my families once they get to know me, because this is a time when all of that's going to come up. If somebody has PTSD, it's going to come up during this time. The patient, it may come up in the patient and it creates challenges in how we deal with their anxiety and fear and pain. It may come up in a family member who's had a history of either abuse or active battle. If they've seen combat, if they're a veteran who's seen combat, the dying process triggers PTSD. And so you really have to be aware of this when you're dealing with families because it's something that needs to be addressed and dealt with.
So speaking of all of that, and this is going to be pre-dying, pre this, but DNR, how important is
Yes.
that?
It's very important. It's really important for the families to know what their loved one wants. It's really tough at the end when you come to the very last moments if the person hasn't said and filled out paperwork to say, this is what I want. It's questioning yourself at the end is guilt is part of the grief process. It helps us process. Everybody has it in one form or another. There's some kind of guilt. I should have done this. I shouldn't have done that. And so we have to learn how to deal with that guilt and that little guilty part of us that feels like they should have done more. We need to take care of that. When you have a DNR in place, you know what that person wants. You know whether they don't want IVs. You know that they don't want to be resuscitated. And then it's off your shoulders. You come to the end and you can peacefully let them go and say goodbye without thinking, should I be calling 911? We do have hospice patients that still are full code. And we try to talk to them about what really happens when you're coded. If someone's in a dying process and a family member just can't let go and they want to bring them back for another day or another few days, it's so hard on that person. The CPR breaks ribs. It's a terrible assault on a body. And if somebody's in this peaceful process of trying to let go, and then all of a sudden you come in with this assault, and if you do not have a DNR in place and 911 is called, they have to do compressions. They have to do CPR. So it is very important to have the DNR in place.
I think going along with that too is not only is it an individual thing and a difficult decision for the individual and you're going through your own stress, but the the post or the surviving family members, siblings, or whatever it might be. No, mom said she wanted this. No, that's not what
Yes.
mom wanted. So that there's an
Yeah.
issue there too if a DNR is not in place. Wouldn't
Yeah.
that be true?
Yes, and I found with my sister when she and I were in the hospital with our mother, she was really sick, and they asked us, "What about a DNR?" And I said, "She has a DNR. She does not want any of this." My sister spoke up and said, "We can't just let her go. We have to do something. I don't agree with that." And the nurse just kind of stepped back and looked at both of us, and I just gave my sister a hug and I said, "It's what she wants. It's what she told me that. She's filled out several of those forms. She told me this is what she wants. And so we need to respect her wishes." And my sister just started crying and said, "Okay, all right." If we had not had the DNR in place, it would have been so much worse.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind and to do sooner than later,
Yes.
is to put a DNR in place because you don't want. I can imagine if I had family members and I was in that position, I was dying and I'm on my deathbed. Now I can't talk, I can't move. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, my my s- my kids. I don't have any, but they're arguing. I can still hear it, like you said, about are they going to let me survive or not? And I'm thinking to myself in my head, I don't want to live. I don't want to
Yeah.
live.
Yeah.
And then when you pass, you have the siblings, they are going to be fighting. So,
Yeah. It's
um,
really, really important.
I also would imagine this entire period, you want things to be as peaceful
Yes.
of a transition as possible. And that's
Yes.
before, during, and after.
Yes, and I recommend music. I recommend keeping the lights low, creating an atmosphere of safety and peace, not allowing anyone to argue in the room, keeping out people. I mean, every family has family members that you know are toxic and you know they
Yeah.
create a disaster wherever they go. And it's hard to keep those people out. It's a difficult thing to do. But I've even written notes for my family members, RN instructions, no visitors except these 3 people, and put it on the door for them so they didn't have to do it themselves. Because it's a journey. This dying process it's a slow unwinding. It's moving toward a goal, and the body is doing its own perfect unwinding process. And it's easy to interrupt that with energy that just doesn't contribute. It's easy to pull this person back, and that's not what we want for them. The good death is one where the person gets to slowly unwind and go toward that. The body prepares and they go toward that peaceful end. And I've seen the most peaceful deaths. They're just working in hospice took away my fear of death altogether. Yeah, there's none left because I see what a peaceful process it can be if the people know how to control the pain, they know, what medications to give, and they know how to create a safe space for the person, which is the whole reason I wrote Please Help Me Die Well, because I really emphasize the spiritual part and the grief part, deal with your own grief, take care of yourself, so you can walk this person through this process. And I've
Yeah.
seen it the other way. I've had a loved one who wasn't clearly in a dying process, and I knew they were, but I wasn't the main person in the family that could speak up. There were other people in charge, including a physician brother-in-law who was an ER physician. And they put in IVs, they put in G-tube, they did all these things to force. So when her body got to the point where she was ready to let go and stop eating and drinking, it was a natural process. I've seen it hundreds of times. They said, if she can't eat, we have to put in a feeding tube. If she can't drink, we've got to put IVs in. And what happens is it's called third spacing. It's the fluid, the body's rejecting it. And so it goes in the tissue between. And so their hands swell up and their feet and legs swell up, and they have nausea and vomiting and increased pain and misery. And she died in pain. And I was heartbroken.
Yeah.
They wouldn't listen to me, and I was heartbroken.
I think several things about what we're talking about just now is, we've used the word journey several times, and this is a journey. And I don't know where it takes you, but you had mentioned earlier on too that you've seen them right before they pass. They might be looking up at something. I don't know what they're looking at. They're somewhat conscious in a way. But I think that's all the more reason to have that peaceful letting them go peacefully.
Yes.
And the other part about this is the physical part, as you're saying that we as humans living, surviving, want to make somebody that we care for live longer. So we force feed, but the body knows naturally it's time for it to shut down. But we are saying, no, don't shut down. I'm going to shove this in you to make you go more, and the body doesn't want it or can't have it,
No, and
and it
it
becomes painful
creates
for the
pain.
dying person.
Yes, it's tragic.
One of the things too, again, going back to the for me personally questioning, what do they see? What do they hear? What are they seeing when they're looking up and things like that? I can't wait for and looking forward to the day, and if this ever happens where I'm gonna use it, AI does a brain mapping of the dying person.
Wouldn't that be
So the
amazing?
people yeah, so the people who are in the room can actually visually see what is happening, and everybody can, you know,
Ooh, that gives me
enjoy.
goosebumps.
It is for me too, because wouldn't that to some people they may think that's morally wrong things, but I say, wouldn't that be wonderful to be able to see, my dad is seeing the rainbow or whatever it is, and it
Yeah,
just slowly fades like a movie.
yeah,
And it and you can go, "It's done," or he's riding off on a horse or whatever it might be, or maybe he's really seeing,
yeah,
whatever your faith is.
yeah,
I think that would be amazing.
mhm,
I
yeah,
really do.
and sometimes people will be able to say, "I just saw my dad," "My aunt so and so is sitting in that chair over there, and they're waiting for me." They sometimes can say, so that just sounds so amazing. I didn't even think of that as a possibility, but that would be incredible.
Somebody out there has to be thinking of it. Come on, Sam Altman, somebody, Elon,
Figure it out.
right, because
Yes,
they are doing brain mapping and we have done that kind of stuff, but, for the dying, I think this would be a great service to both the people who
yes,
are passing and for the ones who are living, because it is such an unknown and we we don't know, and we say, "I hope he or she has gone to a better place."
yeah,
But on the flip side, you don't want to see something bad and go, "Oh my gosh. Quick, start singing and dancing. Dad is having a terrible time passing."
yeah,
But, I know I'm making light of this right now, but it is a serious thing, and, that's I am very, very grateful for you to, put this book together, and again, it's called Please Help Me Die Well. Granted, it is really a guide for nurses, but it's as much of a guide for nurses as it is for, family members who care for their,
yeah.
loved ones.
Actually, I'm currently working on the next one in the series, which is just for family members, taking care I'm almost done with that one, and then I'm gonna do one for the person preparing, how to prepare for death, and then I'm gonna do one for chaplains and one for I've got a whole series that I'm doing. So this first one I wrote for nurses and doctors and, people actually caregivers in the medical community, but the next one that I'm almost finished with, it should be up within the next month. I'll put it up on Amazon with the other ones. It will be much simplified, and it'll be for people like you if you were getting ready to go into this situation. So there isn't the medical jargon, and it is directed directly toward you in the position of a family caregiver with someone who's dying.
Gosh, these are like a dummy's guide to dying.
Yeah.
Remember
Yeah.
those books?
Yes. Yep. Yeah.
But again, I am grateful that you're doing this because a lot of the things that I said in the beginning that what you're saying, I now look back and I see the process exactly in those steps. And certain things I didn't know, and I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know how to act, react. And I didn't know at the end, did I not do something
Yeah.
right? And you don't want to go on, I think, as a living person of having any prolonged guilt of, "Did I do enough towards the end? Did
Yeah.
I miss something?"
Yeah. It's pretty universal for people to say that. So it's very likely, Chuck, that you didn't do anything wrong, that you did everything right, and you would still have those feelings. So I try to let people know that so it makes it a little bit easier to let go of those and say, okay, this is part of my grief process. I'm going to have these guilt feelings because it helps me. It's part of my processing this experience. And so this is part of that process. It triggers me to go and look inside and see, okay, what happened? So you review the whole thing, you work through the grief, you do that whole process. So the guilt is useful. When it's not useful is when it continues. And, you don't get to the point where you say, no, I did everything I could have done. And it's okay.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is okay. It's okay. 99% of the people, you've done all you could do
Yeah.
at the end
Yeah.
of the dying of the loved one. No money in the world and nothing you could do is going to magically make them come back.
It's
So
not.
I want to ask you then, if you had to give one, like a guiding principle to someone who's dying, this is for the person who's dying.
Huh?
What would it be, and how should we act as a surviving person? Does that make any sense?
I hear what you're saying. I would say the one thing that I consider the most important is say what you're feeling and ask for what you need. Don't be afraid to ask your loved ones for what you need and say what you need right up till the end. If all you can do is squeeze their hand and look into their eyes, don't be afraid to do it. And for the people taking care of them, communicate. Tell them you love them. Ask them what you can do to help. Communicate more than less. I had one family that when I walked in, I was doing an admission and I walked in and the children, the whole family took me aside and they said, whatever you do, don't tell mom she's dying. She can't handle it. I know this will be too much for her. And so I listened to them and their concerns. And then I went in the room and shut the door behind me. And I sat down with the woman and she leaned over to me conspiratorially and she said, whatever you do, don't tell my kids I'm dying. They can't handle it. So that was a family that didn't communicate very openly. There's closed family systems and there's open family systems, and closed family systems tend to keep secrets and there's all this control and jockeying for position. The open family systems have an easier time with the dying process. But if I was going to say one thing, it's talk, communicate. Tell your loved ones how you feel. Tell the person that's dying how you feel. Talk to them. Ask what they need. Tell them how you're feeling. Be open. Just be open. Keep your heart open.
That's good to know on both sides. This is more of a personal question to ask you, since you have been in it 40 plus years.
Yeah.
And it's already too late, but I just want to know. And my guilt feeling is towards the end. I'll say I got lazy to the point where, all right, Pops is just laying there with his mouth open. I know he's got to be able to hear me. He's looking at the sky, kind of thing. I'm not going to move him around as much anymore, because I know during the time that he was able to communicate, but couldn't move much, he'd always want me to make sure that he's propped up or laid down or move over this side, move that side. And my fear to myself about not doing enough at the end, that guilt is, was he uncomfortable because I wasn't moving him around? Do you know, does that make a difference for a person in that stage or state of mind, or do you not know for sure?
At the very end, we tend to tell families not to move the person. And
Okay.
it's hard for them to, especially if it's been a prolonged, it's been months and we hammer on the turn them every 2 hours, make sure there's not skin breakdown, but that's to prevent skin breakdown. And it can
Okay.
help but when someone is at the very end and it's this peaceful trying to move out, it's better for them if you don't move them. And we'll usually tell our family members, don't bother them. Don't, we can have ways of cleaning things up without having to turn them over so much. That last little bit, we usually say, don't disturb them. They're in this process, and we keep the pain controlled. So it's not like they're going to be in extra pain because they're not moving. It's better for them if they don't move that last little bit. So you
You
did
just
the
brought
right thing.
you just brought something else up, but I'll say you've taken away 9 years of guilt just now, so thank you.
Oh,
Uh,
good.
the other thing too is for people who choose to pass at home or they're not going to do the hospice away, so they're at home. Is there anything different with that situation?
Well,
Like,
hospice does go into the home. Hospice is a home care program.
yes. Oh, I have a unique situation on that. So,
Yeah. Most of our, like in this area where I am now, there is no inpatient hospice. So usually if there is an inpatient hospice in town, people will only go at the last little bit to that inpatient one. Or if pain is out of control and the nurses, for some reason, can't do it, we don't do IVs at home. So they may need IV pain medication if they have something that's really extreme. I have had to put someone in a hospice home maybe twice in my whole career. And they will go, a lot of times people will go because they want to, but we do 90 I w for me, it's been 99% of my care has been in the person's home or in the nursing home where that has become their home.
wow. Um, I mean, this is all really important. As we were saying at the very beginning, every single one of us will experience this at some point in time. So it's definitely good to know. Before we close out on this, I'd like to ask you, are there maybe 2 or 3 top things that we should do to prepare ourselves as the person that's dying, whether it be far in advance or right before it happens, and or the family members? We talked about a DNR, but if that's one of them, is there anything or something else that we should do just to prepare, be ready?
Yeah. I know I've gotten a lot of advice from my people who are dying, telling me as a person who's not actively dying, not in that stage at all, what to do. I had one man grab me and say, "You have to go travel." He said, "I waited my entire life for my retirement. I saved my money, everything I put toward when I retired." My wife had all these plans to do a world around the world trip. Right after he retired, he came down, he had pancreatic cancer. He died within a month of his retirement. And he's the one that grabbed me and said, "Joanne, do it now. Go now." And that was fairly early in my career. And I took his advice and I traveled. I took my daughter on a cross country unguided horseback trip through the Southern Pyrenees in France. I went to Alaska and did nursing. I just traveled a lot because of him saying that. And I've had so many people after that say it. The other thing is make peace within the family now,
Mm,
because at the very end, you want to be able to communicate with each other well. You don't want to have any unfinished business hanging there holding you back. And so you want to make peace, do everything you can to do healing in your family now. And and a very practical thing I would say that people often don't think about, but it comes up a lot is make sure your house is ready for wheelchairs and hospital beds and that the doors are wide enough and that your shower, you can roll a wheelchair into your shower. Pay attention to the way your house is set up because the process could last a while and you run into all these logistical problems just because of your house setup.
yeah,
And,
agree.
yeah, maintaining a learner's mind, find out everything you can about the process. The more you know, the easier it's gonna be for you.
And that starts by getting the book.
That would
Please help
help,
me
yes.
die
It is
well.
exactly why I wrote "Please Help Me Die Well." It's so people could have all that information.
Well, again, this has been fantastic. So I've got to say thank you very much for coming on today to talk about this because it is an important topic. So Joanne Chitwood, joannechitwood.com. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chuck. It's been a delight.